11 months into my second ever job, I was sacked. That was really quite difficult to share here, and I debated not to, because let's face it, it's a little bit embarrassing. But on that life-changing day, I was called into the meeting room, told to go and pack my bags because I couldn't be trusted. And so at 24, I found myself out on the streets. Wow, that sounded dramatic. I wasn't out on the streets. I found myself as a freelance designer, which I promise you was never, ever part of my grand life plan. Perhaps I'm still not being entirely truthful with you. The reason I couldn't be trusted was because I'd been caught freelancing during my work hours. I know, what an idiot, right? I promise I felt like one too. I'm really glad I can look back at that day, share that story with you and laugh, but the truth is that day was brutal. I felt like a failure. I'd failed at working for someone twice in 3 years. This was only my second ever job out of uni, and if I'm honest, the first one didn't really end that well either. Looking back, I can see that it wasn't feeding me creatively. The culture wasn't right. I was always looking for an outlet elsewhere. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I packed up my things, I went home, I cried hysterically into my pillow for about 3 hours. Proper ugly crying, you know? World has ended crying, wondering how I'd managed to mess up this badly. I was really concerned that I knocked myself off course. I deviated from what was expected of me, from what I was supposed to do. But I had bills to pay, which is always a great motivation, and I'm pretty scrappy. So I went out and got myself some more freelance work, all the while wondering what I was going to do differently this time. From my point of view, I was the one that needed to change because I was the one who had failed. I got very hung up at this point on following the rules, editing myself to become a version of myself that I deemed was more professional. I'd spent 2 and a bit years in a role as a junior designer in environments where I never felt like I could be myself. I was always paring back my personality, my dress sense, my language, and on certain occasions, even my values and beliefs to blend in. It was really pretty exhausting looking back. I can see that the culture wasn't right. I was unhappy and I was uncomfortable, but I didn't realize those were the reasons at the time. Why is it that when we find ourselves in situations that make us feel uncomfortable or unfulfilled, we assume that we are the problem? Wouldn't it be a healthier question to ask whether or not we are in the right environment with the right people? Now, I know you're probably thinking, oh great, another talk about authenticity. I get it, I've had my fill of those too. But this is really about how we edit ourselves to try and make a good impression. Authenticity is about what we put forward. Self-censorship is about what we hold back. If you're anything like me, you probably grew up hearing things like, shh, quiet, stop being so bossy. Or, for goodness sake, don't use those words around Grandma, she'll have a fit. Or, most common of all, and my personal favourite, behave yourself today, we want to make a good impression. Do those sound familiar? Pretty standard part of growing up, right? And as children, we are taught to keep certain personality traits under wraps or dulled down to appease and please others. Like the kid who's got the makings of an incredible leader, but is told, shh, quiet down, stop being so bossy. We are taught to keep certain personality traits under wraps for fear of judgment. It comes from a place of love. It comes from an attempt to keep us safe. But wouldn't it be better if we harnessed those parts of our personalities, if we nurtured them? It's too late when that child has made his or her way into adulthood, believing that they must keep a fundamental part of who they are hidden to get ahead in life, to succeed. What about the kid who's excelling at sport? I was having a conversation only a couple of days before this with someone who has a massive passion for football. Growing up, that's where his head was. He excelled at it. That was his passion. That's where he felt like most himself. But he shared with me that his coach was always saying, stop showing off. Isn't that bananas? Why are we teaching ourselves to hold back, to blend in, to make other people feel better? Look, we could go into much darker territories here, like someone who has to keep their sexuality hidden for years on end from members of their family for fear of judgment. Or what about the new mother who would love to go straight back to work rather than take a year of maternity leave? She's got big career plans, but she's frightened to voice these desires out loud because that's not what she's supposed to think. She's scared that her instincts and her desires are wrong, that there could be something wrong with her. Or what about the new father who would cherish a chance to be a stay-at-home dad? His own upbringing has him determined to play a more active role in his children's lives. But again, he's frightened to voice these opinions out loud because the man is supposed to provide. And so he doesn't. Having to consciously self-censor ourselves throughout our lives, I believe, is traumatic. And my concern is that we're not growing out of this habit. We're bringing it into our adult lives. And I believe we're not doing it on purpose. We're doing it unconsciously because that's what we've been taught to do. And so the cycle of self-censorship continues because we end up passing it down to our own children. I caught myself doing exactly the same thing to my daughter, Murphy. Quiet down, Murph, stop being so bossy. Her name's Murphy, by the way. We named her after the female rocket scientist in Interstellar, the movie. Fantastic movie, definitely recommend you see it. And while I'm mentioning that is another example of editing your personality to blend in for fear of judgment. We almost didn't name her this because we were expecting a backlash, judgment, questions from people around us. And actually we kept it a secret until the day she was born. And we did get some judgment. My grandmother literally said to me on the phone hours after I'd given birth, "Oh well, maybe you'll think of something nicer when you're feeling a bit more yourself." And I think this behavior manifests in many different ways, from editing our desires, beliefs and values to blend in, as we've mentioned, but also how we edit ourselves to fit into the stereotype of a boardroom. This thought sent me right back to my early days freelancing, where I thought the only suitable attire to attend a networking event in was one of those block colour pencil dresses and impossible to walk into stilettos. The Apprentice has a lot to answer for, if you ask me. When we do edit who we are, we think we are doing it to make a good impression. We think it will get us further in life. It'll get us where we need to be with the people who we need to be with. But what if by doing it, we are actually missing out on making connections with the people that we should be surrounding ourselves with? To me, that's completely terrifying. That by editing ourselves, holding back fundamental parts of our personalities, our beliefs and our values in one moment in time, could have us miss out on that perfect life partner, friend, business coach, whoever it might be. For me, it's entirely exciting that by showing up as 100% ourselves all of the time, wherever we are seen and heard, could have us building relationships and connections with the people that we're supposed to be with, the people that want us to succeed. It's a big subject, but I think breaking the cycle starts with self-awareness. Slowing down and being really conscious about what we're holding back, when we're holding back, and with who. And constantly questioning, am I just doing this to make a good impression or to not offend anyone? And we also need to extend this awareness to our children, our colleagues, and our family members. Do I really need to pull up my kids' constant, annoying, curious questioning up? Or should I be nourishing that part of their personality? Should I be nurturing it? Do I really need to pull up my team on how they show up to work and their dress sense? Or should I be encouraging them to show up as themselves and be happy and be comfortable and be seen? Wonderful things can happen when we stop self-censoring. And wonderful things happen when we actively discourage it. Let's think about Pride events. Absolutely no one is self-censoring at a Pride event because they are surrounded by their tribe. They are surrounded by the people that want them to succeed and flourish as themselves. Isn't that amazing? But isn't it also a little bit tragic that that's isolated to one event and one moment in time? What if we could create environments like this all the time for everyone to be themselves? Ultimately, isn't that how we should be living our lives every single day? Recently, I've noticed on LinkedIn, traditionally a super pared back corporate platform where everyone just talks about business and all their profile photos are those weird sort of side poses, you know, the ones with the white headshots, white backgrounds. Recently, I've noticed even there, people are slowly revealing themselves. Gone are those corporate headshots. We're seeing profile photos with the kids in tow. People are talking about their experiences, their beliefs, their hobbies, and connections are happening because of those small reveals. People are building relationships with people that get them, that align with their own values. Beautiful things are happening when people are rejecting self-censorship. And sure, there will be those people who, this platform is only for business. Why are we talking about our hobbies? There will be those people. But if we're offending them with our experiences and our sharing of stories, do we really want to be doing business with them anyway and talking to them anyway? The right doors will open with the right people in the right places. On one occasion, during my early days out and about after that brutal day, I was out and about freelancing, networking at various events in my corporate uniform of my block colour pencil dress and heels, hobbling into venues uncomfortably. On one occasion, I was fortunate enough to meet a business owner who liked what I did and offered me a referral to someone who was looking for my services. I was thrilled. Clearly, my mission to self-censor myself was working and opportunities were happening. Amazing. After the event, he sent me an email introducing me to this person, and I replied almost instantly with my excitement and enthusiasm. Super excited to meet them, couldn't wait to chat about the project, when was good to meet up, the usual stuff. In my excitement and enthusiasm, I made one fatal error. At the bottom of my email reply, instead of the standard, accepted, conforming, kind regards, I'd written toodle pip. Shame on me. Now I know you're probably thinking, Jess, what's the big deal? And I did too, until I had a very, very flustered, angry phone call from the guy who'd offered me the referral. He told me, very loudly, over the phone, that I would never get ahead in the industry using language like that. It was entirely unprofessional, and he didn't feel confident sending any more referrals my way. I was gutted. I'd failed again. I'd let my personality slip out of my corporate mask, and I'd failed again. But here's the thing. He could not have been more wrong. I did end up meeting with that prospect, and we bonded over Labradors, coffee. It was fantastic. And she shared with me that it was really refreshing to see some enthusiasm and excitement come over email, and that encouraged her to meet with me even more. And not only that, we ended up working together for years. She took me with her when she moved into various marketing roles. And she even referred me to many, many other businesses, and doors and opportunities opened up for me everywhere with the right people who are not offended by toodle pip. And now I never ever sign my emails with kind regards, ever. It's one of my rules. And it would be so strange, I think, if we were at a networking event, or if I was having a conversation with one of you after this event, had a nice rapport, had a nice chat, and then I ended the conversation with kind regards and walked off. That would be so strange. That is not the way the world works. I could do a whole other talk on how we should be writing our emails, how we speak in real life, but that's another subject for another day. We aren't born with the fear of judgment. We're taught to fear it. As I've said, it comes from a place of love. It comes from an attempt to keep us safe. It can save us from humiliation. But I really believe that it can also keep us from achieving our wildest dreams, reaching our goals, and building more fulfilling relationships. I know I've touched on the impact of self-censoring in our work and our careers, but I want to share one more story with you. You may remember a little earlier I mentioned the mother and father who had very different views on how they wanted to raise their families. Myself and my husband are those parents. When we were discussing starting a family, it was a really easy conversation for us to have because we found our tribe And we'd made the decision to never self-censor each other or ourselves when it came to our desires and beliefs and goals in life. So I shared with him that I never really had a deep down desire to be a stay-at-home mum. In fact, it terrified me. That was quite difficult to say out loud, actually, because, again, I'm expecting judgment. But I did want a family. And also, I was at the very beginning of my freelance career, and quite frankly, none of my clients were going to wait around for me while I took 6 or 12 months off, and I'd have to start again from scratch. And my husband shared with me his deep desire to be a stay-at-home dad. He didn't want to be the guy who left the house at 8 and came home after bedtime. He wanted a hands-on, active role. So the solution for us was pretty simple. Murphy was born. My son Max was born 14 months after that. I know, crazy people. And cue the judgment, the questions, the disbelief. Not from family, because they knew what we were getting ourselves into. But I remember one day a health visitor visiting the house and being really confused why Dave could answer more questions about our daughter's development than I could. And in fact, on her 3rd visit, she asked my husband to leave the room, and then asked me whether I needed any support, whether I was being controlled, because I wasn't saying much during these visits. Can you imagine how he must have felt? And my husband shared with me instances of going to parent and baby classes and being ostracized and isolated from cliques of mothers who didn't include him in the conversation. It was a really, really tough and interesting time. Meanwhile, I was out and about at networking events, no longer in my block colour dress, no worries, but being asked by men and women, shouldn't you be at home? Who's looking after your baby? It was a really, really rough time. But ultimately, it's been the best decision we ever made for us. The only way we could have avoided judgment from perfect strangers would have been to hold in our instincts, desires, beliefs, and goals, and not take the path that we took. And I know that if we had self-censored ourselves, we wouldn't be as happy. If I had self-censored my answers when those people shared with me questions like, what you're doing is wrong, you know that, right? They'll only be young once. You'll regret this. I wouldn't have had such interesting, challenging, difficult conversations with people from all walks of life. If I had surrendered to the need or the instinct to blend in, not rock the boat, not offend, I would have listened to that guy who sent me the referral and carried on signing my emails with kind regards, and I know that the opportunities that opened up for me never would have opened up. Never would have happened. If I had focused on the fear rather than the opportunity for connections, conversations, and budding relationships, I would have kept all of these opinions to myself, and I wouldn't be standing in front of you today. Magical things can happen when we stop self-censoring. So I urge you, slow down, become hyper-aware of what you're holding back, and ask yourself why. Am I just doing it to make a good impression? Toolpip?